So let me paint you a picture. It's Tuesday morning, you're driving to work, coffee in hand, mentally calculating if you can afford that weekend trip you've been planning. Then, bang, your check engine light comes on. Your stomach drops because you know that you've got maybe $400 in your savings account, and you are about to find out that fixing your car is going to cost $1,200. Sound familiar? Here's what's crazy. 56% of Americans, that's more than half, cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense without going into debt. According to Bankrate's 2024 Annual Emergency Savings Report, we are collectively living on the edge of financial disaster, and most of us don't even realize how dangerous that edge really is. My name is John, and I spend way too much time thinking about emergency funds and why most people are getting them completely wrong. If you're someone who lies awake at night worrying about money, who's tired of living paycheck to paycheck, or who's confused about how much you actually need saved before you can sleep soundly at night, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're going to completely rethink everything you've been told about emergency funds, and I'm going to show you why the advice you're probably following right now might actually be setting you up for failure. Look, here's what every financial guru has been telling you for the past 30 years. Save 3 to 6 months of expenses for your emergency fund. 3 to 6 months. It's like financial gospel at this point. But here's the thing. That advice is lazy. It's outdated, and frankly, it's dangerous for a lot of people because it treats emergency funds like a one-size-fits-all solution, when in reality, your emergency fund needs are as unique as your fingerprint. Let me explain what I mean. The 3 to 6 months rule came from a time when the economy looked completely different. We're talking about advice that was formulated in the 1980s and 90s, when the average job search took maybe 6 to 8 weeks, when healthcare costs weren't spiraling out of control, when gig economy workers didn't exist, when side hustle wasn't even in our vocabulary. Fast forward to 2026, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the average duration of unemployment is about 20 weeks. That's 5 months, and that's just the average. If you're over 45, that number jumps significantly. If you're in a specialized field, it can take even longer. Now, you might be thinking, okay, John, so I should aim for 6 months then, right? Not so fast. Here's what most people don't realize. When financial experts say 3 to 6 months of expenses, they're talking about your essential expenses, not your current spending, and there's a massive difference. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you currently spend $4,500 a month. That includes your mortgage, utilities, groceries, car payment, insurance, gas, Netflix, Spotify, gym membership, eating out, entertainment, everything. But if you lost your job tomorrow, could you cut that down? Absolutely. Cancel the streaming services, pause the gym membership, stop eating out, cut back on groceries. Your essential expenses, the absolute bare minimum you need to survive, might only be $3,200 a month. So if we're talking about 6 months of expenses, are we talking about $27,000, 6 months at $4,500, or $19,200, 6 months at $3,200? See the problem? That's an $8,000 difference, and nobody's being clear about which number you should be aiming for. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something that frustrates me to no end about mainstream financial advice. The traditional emergency fund advice completely ignores the psychological component of money, and that's psychology. It's everything. Here's what I've observed over years of studying personal finance. People don't fail at building emergency funds because they don't understand the math. They fail because psychologically, saving for something as abstract as a future emergency feels impossible when there are immediate needs and wants screaming for attention right now. Think about it. When your friend texts you about concert tickets, when you see that sale at Target, when your kid asks for new shoes, those are concrete, immediate, and emotional. But an emergency fund? That's abstract, distant, and purely logical. Your brain is literally wired to prioritize the immediate over the distant. It's called hyperbolic discounting, and it's why we're all terrible at saving for retirement, and it's why emergency funds feel so hard to build. Now, this is where conventional advice makes its biggest mistake. They tell you to save $15,000 or $20,000 or $25,000, and when you've got $200 in your savings account, that goal feels so insurmountably distant that you just give up. You don't even try. A study from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that people who are told to save a large amount are actually less likely to start saving than people who are given smaller incremental goals. It's the paradox of overwhelm. So here's what I want you to understand. The goal isn't to have the perfect emergency fund tomorrow. The goal is to have a better emergency fund than you have today, and then make it even better next month and the month after that. This is why I'm going to give you a completely different framework. Forget 3 to 6 months. Instead, think of your emergency fund in tiers, like levels in a video game. Each level gives you more protection, more security, and more peace of mind. Tier 1, the Survival Fund, $1,000. This is your starter emergency fund. If you have nothing saved right now, this is your first goal. Not $20,000, not 6 months of expenses, $1,000. Why $1,000? Because according to the Pew Research Center, the most common financial emergencies are things like car repairs, average $500 to $800, urgent dental work, average $300 to $600, or a minor medical bill. Having $1,000 covers the vast majority of life's little disasters. And here's the psychological magic. Once you hit that $1,000 mark, suddenly something shifts in your brain. Suddenly, you're not living in constant anxiety. That check engine light doesn't trigger a panic attack. You've got breathing room. More importantly, you've proven to yourself that you can save. And that belief, that evidence that you're capable of changing your financial situation, that's priceless. Tier 2, the Breathing Room Fund, 1 month of essential expenses. Once you've got your $1,000, your next goal is to save 1 month of essential expenses. Remember, we're talking about essentials: housing, utilities, basic food, insurance, minimum debt payments. For most people, this is somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000. Look, here's the reality. 1 month isn't going to get you through unemployment, but you know what it will do? It'll give you options. If your hours get cut, you've got time to find a side hustle. If you have a falling out with your toxic boss, you can actually afford to quit without having another job lined up. If you need to take emergency time off to care for a sick family member, you can do it without immediately drowning. 1 month buys you agency, and in personal finance, agency is everything. Tier 3, the Real Security Fund, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses. Now we're getting to the traditional advice, but notice you didn't start here. You built up to it. You've already proven to yourself that you can save. You've already experienced the psychological relief of having money set aside. You're ready for this. For most people, 3 to 6 months of essential expenses is somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000. That's a massive range, and it depends entirely on your situation. Here's how to calculate your number. Start with your essential monthly expenses. Let's say it's $3,000. Now ask yourself these questions. How stable is your job? If you're a tenured professor, 3 months might be plenty. But if you're in a volatile industry like tech startups or real estate, you want 6 months minimum. How many income sources do you have? If you're a single-income household, lean towards 6 months. If you're dual income, you might be fine with 3 to 4 months. What's your health situation? If you've got chronic conditions that might lead to unexpected medical bills, pad that number. How many dependents do you have? Kids, aging parents, pets, they all increase your risk and your potential emergency costs. Do you own a home? If yes, add at least $2,000 to $5,000 to your fund for major home repairs. According to Home Advisor, the average emergency home repair costs around $3,000. Tier 4, the Ultimate Freedom Fund, 12 months of essential expenses. Here's where I'm going to challenge you further. If you really want to sleep soundly at night, if you really want genuine financial security in 2026's uncertain economy, you need a full year of expenses saved. I know, that sounds insane. For someone with $3,000 in monthly essential expenses, that's $36,000. That's a down payment on a house. That's a new car. That's your kid's first year of college. But here's what a year of expenses gives you that 6 months doesn't: true freedom.
With a year of runway, you can be strategic. If you lose your job, you don't have to desperately take the first offer that comes along. You can hold out for something that actually advances your career. You can take time to retrain or pivot industries. You can start that business you've been dreaming about. You can move across the country for a better opportunity without the crushing pressure of needing income tomorrow. According to data from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Household Economics and Decision-Making, people with more than 9 months of emergency savings report significantly lower stress levels and higher life satisfaction than people with less, even when controlling for income level. It's not about the money, it's about the options. It's about the power to make decisions based on what's best for your life, not just what's necessary for survival.
Now, let's talk about why 2026 specifically changes the emergency fund game. First, inflation. Even though inflation has cooled from the crazy highs of 2022-2023, prices haven't come back down. What cost $1,000 in 2020 costs about $1,200 now. So that old advice about a $10,000 emergency fund, it's really more like $12,000 to $13,000 in today's dollars. Second, job market volatility. Look, I don't want to be doom and gloom here, but we're seeing massive shifts with AI, automation, and changing work structures. According to McKinsey's 2025 report on the future of work, nearly 30% of jobs will be significantly transformed or eliminated by 2030. That's just 4 years away. This doesn't mean you're going to lose your job, but it does mean that career transitions are going to become more common, and those transitions often come with gaps in income. Third, and this is huge, the gig economy has fundamentally changed income stability. Almost 40% of American workers now have some form of variable income, whether that's freelancing, contract work, commission-based sales, or seasonal employment. If your income varies, the traditional emergency fund advice is borderline useless. You need a different approach entirely. Here's what I recommend for variable income. Your emergency fund should be 6 months of expenses minimum, and ideally closer to a year. But more importantly, you need what I call a revenue stabilization fund. This is separate from your emergency fund. This is the money that smooths out your income. When you have a great month, you put the excess into this fund. When you have a terrible month, you pull from it to make up the difference. It acts like a buffer that turns your variable income into stable, predictable monthly paychecks to yourself. Okay, so you know what you need to save. Now the question is, how do you actually build this thing? Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. You cannot save your way to financial security on willpower alone. I don't care how motivated you are right now watching this video. Willpower fails every single time. You need systems, you need automation, you need to remove your own decision-making from the equation as much as possible. Here's my proven strategy. Step 1, pay yourself first, but make it automatic. Set up an automatic transfer from your checking account to your emergency fund savings account the day after your paycheck hits. Not when you remember, not when you feel like it, automatically. Start with 10% of your take-home pay. If that feels impossible, start with 5%. Heck, start with 2% if you have to. The amount matters less than the automation and the consistency. Step 2, make it inconvenient to access. This is key. Your emergency fund should not be in your regular bank account where you can easily transfer money to checking at 2 a.m. when you're scrolling through Amazon. Open a high-yield savings account at a different bank than your checking account. As of early 2026, you should be getting somewhere between 4 and 5% annual interest on this money. That's not nothing. On a $10,000 emergency fund, that's $400 to $500 in free money a year. Some good options are Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Ally Bank, Capital One 360, or American Express Personal Savings. Shop around for the best rate, but make sure it's FDIC insured. The key is that transferring money from this savings account to your checking should take 1 to 2 business days. That delay is your friend. It gives you time to ask yourself, is this really an emergency or do I just want it? Step 3.
fund it like it's a bill. Here's a mental shift that changed everything for me. Stop thinking of your emergency fund contribution as savings. Think of it as a bill you owe to future you. Your emergency fund contribution is non-negotiable as your rent, your car payment, or your electricity bill. It's not optional. It's not what you do with leftover money, because there's never leftover money. There's always something to spend it on. Step 4. Accelerate with windfalls. Any money that you weren't expecting, tax refunds, bonuses, birthday cash, that $50 you found in your old jacket pocket, 50% of it goes straight to your emergency fund, not eventually, immediately. According to research by the National Bureau of Economic Research, people are far more likely to save found money than earned money. Use that psychological quirk to your advantage. Step 5. Create positive momentum. Set milestone celebrations. When you hit $1,000, do something small to celebrate. Get your favorite coffee, watch a movie, whatever. When you hit $5,000, do something a bit bigger. When you hit your full goal, celebrate meaningfully. Why? Because building an emergency fund is hard. It requires sacrifice. And if it's all sacrifice with no acknowledgement of progress, you'll burn out. You need to train your brain to associate saving with positive feelings, not just deprivation. Now, you might be thinking, John, this all sounds great, but I've got credit card debt. Shouldn't I pay that off before saving? This is the most common objection I get, and here's my answer. It depends on the interest rate, but generally, you need both. Here's what I recommend. Build your Tier 1 emergency fund, $1,000 first, even if you have debt. Why? Because without that buffer, the first time an emergency hits, you're going right back to the credit cards, and you've made no actual progress. Once you've got $1,000 saved, then split your extra money between debt payoff and continuing to build your emergency fund. The psychological benefit of seeing both numbers improve simultaneously, debt going down, savings going up, is powerful. If your credit card interest rate is above 20%, maybe go 70% to debt, 30% to savings. If it's lower, go 50-50. The point is to make progress on both fronts. Another objection, but John, I'm losing money by keeping cash in savings instead of investing it. Look, I hear you. If you put $10,000 in an index fund and the market returns 10% over the next year, you've made $1,000. If you keep it in a savings account earning 4%, you've only made $400. You've lost $600 in potential gains. But here's what that analysis misses. Emergency funds aren't about maximizing returns. They're about minimizing risk. They're about giving you the stability and security to take smart risks everywhere else in your life. Besides, what happens if you invest that money and then lose your job during a market downturn? Now you've got two problems: no income, and your emergency fund is down 30%. You're forced to sell investments at a loss to cover your expenses. That's the worst possible scenario. Here's my rule. Emergency funds are sacred. They stay in cash or cash equivalents, high-yield savings accounts, money market accounts, maybe short-term CDs if you're being really fancy, but never, ever in the stock market. Okay, so you've built your emergency fund. Congratulations! But now comes the hard part, not spending it on non-emergencies. Here's a framework I use. An emergency is an unexpected expense that affects your health, safety, or ability to earn income. Car breaks down and you need it to get to work? Emergency. Need a root canal? Emergency. Furnace dies in the middle of winter? Emergency. Your company downsizes and you lose your job? Emergency. You know what's not an emergency? That sale at your favorite store? Christmas presents. Christmas happens every year. It's not unexpected. Your annual vacation, a new iPhone, your friend's destination wedding. Look, I get it. Sometimes there are gray areas. Your sister's getting married and you're in the wedding party and it's going to cost $2,000 between the dress and travel and everything else. Is that an emergency? No, it's not. It's a known, predictable expense. You should have been saving separately for it. Here's the thing, and this is where I get a little frustrated with how people use these funds. Your emergency fund is not a piggy bank for things you don't want to budget for. It's not a slush fund. It's not fun money. Every time you dip into your emergency fund for a non-emergency, you're taking away your own safety net. You're putting future you at risk for present you's wants. So let me bring this all home. An emergency fund isn't about the specific dollar amount. It's really not even about the money itself. It's about building a foundation for every other financial goal you have. You can't invest for retirement effectively if you're constantly pulling money out to cover emergencies. You can't pay off debt aggressively if every unexpected expense sends you back to the credit cards. You can't take career risks or start a business or make any meaningful change in your life if you're living on the edge financially. Your emergency fund is freedom. It's security. It's the ability to say no to things that don't serve you and yes to opportunities that do. It's the difference between making decisions out of desperation and making decisions out of strength. So here's what I want you to do right now, and I mean right now as soon as this video is over. Calculate your essential monthly expenses. Be honest, but be strict about what's actually essential. Decide which tier you're going to target first. If you have nothing saved, that's $1,000. If you have $1,000, it's 1 month of expenses. Set up an automatic transfer to start funding that goal, even if it's only $50 per paycheck. Start. Put that emergency fund in a separate, high-yield savings account that takes 1 to 2 days to access. Commit to treating this fund as sacred. Create your own definition of what counts